and Dan Marino in the 1983 draft that saw 6 quarterbacks drafted. I mean, like Todd Blackledge, and I mean, et cetera, et cetera. You name. I mean, I'm sure that even the audience is thinking about tons of more names that people who are supposed to be great quarterbacks in the NFL, who were the stereotype of a new quarterback coming out of college, and just weren't that way in the NFL. I just think that the quarterback play has been too scarred for me. I don't like it when teams pick quarterbacks in the first round, period. I remember I'll even make this a little bit more personal. In 2007, when the Dolphins were picking, had to pick a quarterback. And I think it was the year that, I don't remember if it was, I think it was Russell's year, Jamarcus Russell's year. Brady Quinn was coming out, and everybody was like, oh, are the Dolphins going to pick him? Are the Dolphins going to pick him? And I like the idea. I mean, the Dolphins only drafted 2 quarterbacks all time in the first round, and that's Dan Marino and Bob Greasy, both Hall of Famers. Greasy, of course, led the Dolphins to their 1972 undefeated season, and Dan Marino is possibly the best statistical quarterback, or one of the best statistical quarterbacks. Of course, Brett Favre's broken all of his records, but Dan Marino was, the ideal, quarterback, easily top 5 quarterback in the NFL. So, the Dolphins have had really good luck drafting quarterbacks in the first rounds. And that year when they were thinking about picking Brady Quinn, everything in me was excited because, they thought they were going to pick the new franchise guy, but I did not want them to do it, no matter how good Quinn looked at Notre Dame or whatever. So I was a little bit relieved, I guess, when they drafted Ted Ginn Jr., which was a bust in and of itself. Oh my gosh. What a terrible pick by the Dolphins. But, I just have not been a big fan. Even when they drafted Ryan Tannehill, and I've been excited for him just the past few weeks. He's, played, or the past 2 years, he's played really well, and you feel like he's, especially when you watch the Dolphin games, you get the sense that he's the guy to lead the team in the future. I mean, the second he gets a good offensive line, which, the Dolphins' offensive line play was the worst possibly, I think, in the NFL this year. And possibly, all time. You could probably make that argument as well. And last year, the Dolphins' receiving core was among the worst in the NFL. So the 2, positions that the quarterback needs to succeed the most have been absolutely awful on the Dolphins for the past 2 years. And Tannehill's been the guy that you feel like is able to he's been able to persevere through that, make great throws in great situations. He's really, he was able to take a bunch of sacks this year and get back up. He was able to, find places to throw the ball when receivers who were terrible route runners were running routes for him. You got the sense that the Dolphins were in good shape. And even then, like when they drafted him, I had so much concern because I'm so against drafting a quarterback in the first round of the NFL draft. And I know there's been a ton of hits: Peyton Manning, Dan Marino, John Elway, Jim Kelly, et cetera, names I've already dropped during this show. But it just seems to me that you don't draft a quarterback in the first round. I think you wait to the second round because that's where guys like Joe Montana and Tom Brady and name the great quarterbacks who have come later in rounds, or even undrafted, Tony Romo, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of good potential that can be found outside of the draft. So for the Texans, I don't even think you take Bridgewater, much less Johnny Manziel. I don't know what Wade Phillips is thinking. For me, I think the Houston Texans' defense is already as tough as it can be, but I think the addition of Jadeveon Clowney would just tear apart the AFC South. I don't see how Houston. I know that Jacksonville's terrible, of course, and the Titans are just kind of going to dwell in mediocrity for who knows how long. And the Colts are the perennial good players in the division. I think the pressure that Houston could put on quarterbacks with J.J. Watt and Jadeveon Clowney would be tremendous. Can you imagine? We saw, I think everybody in this who's ever watched sports has probably seen the hit that Jadeveon Clowney gave to the poor Michigan running back in January 1st of last year in the Outback Bowl, where it was just a monstrous hit. I think that still rings in my mind when I talk about Jadeveon Clowney, but. For that season, all anybody could talk about was how good that guy was. And this year, of course, things tailed off because our offense was started, playing with him. But can you imagine the freedom that in the space that guy would have, if the offensive line was mostly concerned with J.J. Watt, or vice versa? How much could J.J. Watt get space if Jadeveon Clowney could? get that. And, with Brian Cushing and the great outside linebackers the Texans have, how good would it be? And, I mean, you can even speak about how good the run defense is, because you can't put a tight end on either of those guys. You got to, put a tackle on both of them. And honestly, no tackle is going to be good enough to hold one of those two players for several plays. I mean, I'll bet you those guys will be in the backfield like twice a series. I think that it just makes the Houston Texans defense unstoppable. And continue going with Matt Schaub or Case Keenum, for goodness sakes. They played well with him. Just get a quarterback that can manage the game and do what they've done. Keep hoping the offensive line play keeps holding out. You've got the receivers, you've got the tight end. I mean, even Garrett Graham was a fantasy option. I had him on my team last year, and he wasn't even the number one tight end, and you can put any running back behind that system, and it will run forever. I think the Texans are possibly a team that's really looking up. I mean, there's been hardly any teams that have been as good as the Texans are in the position that they're at. I can't believe they lost 14 straight games with the team that they had. Jacksonville was clearly the worst team in that division. So, Houston Texans, I think that they're set. I don't think that they need to pay attention to Wade Phillips. One, he's not even their coach. I don't even know if he holds a position with the organization anymore. Two, Johnny Manziel's freestyle isn't good. He's going to get injured. It's just not what they need. They need stable play at quarterback, and they also need a stable leader at quarterback, which I'm not 100% convinced Manziel can do. And I'm also pretty sure that Teddy Bridgewater, however good he is and however much I really like him and would suggest a team picking him up, later in the draft. I don't like the idea of the quarterback being first overall. And finally, I just don't think the quarterback is the problem with the Texans. I just think that the ability they have to cause havoc on defense is unbelievable. So if I was the Houston Texans, I'd say forget about Wade Phillips. Just do what you want to do. Pick Jadeveon Clowney and be the best team in the AFC East. Pressure Andrew Luck. I think that's where the Colts are the team to beat. Andrew Luck is the young guy that's going to lead. He's possibly one of the best first round. He kind of goes against the statement I said earlier about the Houston Texans being the quarterbacks in the first round of the draft being busts. But certainly get pressure on that guy and make him stop. Minimize T.Y. Hilton. Do what you can do on defense to stop that Colts offense. I think that the Titans and the Jaguars will be easy to stop no matter what. So Houston, I think you've got the division pretty well on hand considering the talent on your team. I would suggest just add Jadeveon Clowney. Forget about all the talk. Or if you can't think of anything else to do, trade away picks and get a good decent quarterback if you want one, and get a stellar offensive line play. That first overall pick in the draft doesn't come along very often, especially when people like Manziel, who people are, I guess, NFL GMs are just raving over recently, is available. You can trade the pick for something really higher. So that's what I would suggest to you if you were the Houston Texans. All right, my friends, with all that, I've talked for a little bit, and I think it's time for a good break. I'm going to bring you something from the Commodores. Oh, one of my favorites, Lady You Bring Me Up, by Lionel Richie himself. Here you go.